Now, I'm a massive Saw fan. I really like the first 3 films a lot, and I think the franchise as a whole is just a lot of fun. I realise that is a pretty unpopular opinion, that the Saw films often get demonised as being these cheap, ugly, sadistic films that exist just to show off gory torture scenes. But for me, there's always been this real sense of energy and dynamism that makes the cartoony morality game set pieces of a Saw film so much fun. I always look at the Saw films as being these huge, larger-than-life thrill rides, and there's always this sense of, and I know it sounds weird to say this, but there's always a sense of fun, of staging things in this huge, overblown theatrical way that's fundamentally about being exciting and entertaining. Why do I bring that up? Well, because I've read a lot of reviews of the Saw franchise that say that those films are just nothing but bottom-of-the-barrel, tacky, badly acted sadism in small, dirty rooms that exist just to be cheap and bloody and to repulse their audience, with the occasional flimsy bit of psychology thrown in order to justify it all. And when I was watching Death Count, which is a new horror film from the year of 2022, I found myself thinking, this is what it must feel like for those people that watch Saw and absolutely hate it. Because Death Count really is nothing but terribly acted zero-budget gore and sadism in tiny, grubby little rooms with absolutely no plot and not even the slightest attempt at any story beyond its scenes of ugly self-mutilation. See, when Saw first came out, it sparked off this whole wave of people wake up in a room and have got to figure out why they're there films, which gave a lot of filmmakers a chance to make very cheap films, yeah, but it also forced them to come up with a smart, twisty script. Things like Exam or 9 Dead being amongst probably some of the better examples. Whereas more recent stuff like Triggered or The Blackout Experiment or Blood in the Water, Saw meets Jaws, really hasn't cut the mustard, keeping the kind of minimalist aesthetic but losing the smart scripts. So the plot for this one is that we've got a group of people who are being forced to compete for likes, all being held in separate prison cells where they're forced to maim themselves whilst they're also being streamed online. The one with the least likes gets executed until, of course, there's only one left at the end, and it becomes a matter of can the prisoners figure out what's going on and find a way to escape before it's all too late. Now, you can see why a film like this might be attractive in the climate in which it must have been made. All the scenes where the captives are being held in their cells involve actors on their own not having to interact with anybody else. And the problem is that the film itself is like that, random scenes that don't seem to exist in the same world as each other. It's got absolutely nothing new or interesting to say despite some kind of vague philosophical posturing and these 10th generation photocopied jigsaw monologues with internet speak crammed in that you get every now and then. Really, there's only 2 things that Death Count has got to offer anyone. Number 1 is that it stars Sarah French. Now, Sarah French is a very likeable, charismatic, low-budget actress who sort of started off working in and around the B. Harrison Smith, Felissa Rose stable. She's clearly light years ahead of everyone else on screen, and as all her scenes are shot separately, as were just about everyone else's, it can be said that she's quite literally in a different film from everyone else. It's a shame then that even though this is Sarah French's film, where she's actually the star, she's still called upon to strip off and flagellate herself topless like this is some 1970s nunsploitation film. Doing stuff like that's okay if you're a rubbish actress in a daft fun film, but doing it when you're the only one in a barren and ugly and totally joyless film who's giving a decent performance just makes it seem like an act of extreme masochism. Sarah French deserves way better than this, and I hope she gets it soon. Second of all, if you're of a mind, Death Count has got some really strikingly sadistic low-budget gore of the unflinchingly extreme variety that puts everything on screen and lingers on it for as long as possible, in a way that shows you how important it clearly is to the filmmakers themselves. Death Count is as gory as any of the Saw films, but it's got none of the theatricality and charm in how it's presented. Instead it's just, whoa, look at all this nasty shit, and because there are no characters, because the story's so non-existent, you can enjoy it without ever having to worry about what's actually at stake. It becomes just this totally mechanical, people waving rubber and fake blood at you. An awful lot of rubber and fake blood, admittedly. But for the most part, Death Count is just really crushingly boring and ugly and shoddily thrown together. Michael Madsen, of all people, even turns up as this totally deflated looking cop. There's a scene where he says early on, "What the fuck am I doing here? I'm too old for this shit," whilst slumped in a chair, and you wonder if he even knew that the cameras were rolling at the time. because he really seems desperately miserable for the whole film. I really don't know how Michael Madsen's career's tanked so hard in the space of just a decade or so, but these days, pretty much any time you see his name on anything, it's really the kiss of death, because he seems to be the name actor that you'll hire for your film when you literally can't afford anybody else. And that's sad, because I do like Michael Madsen, but I think that he's just way past the point of ever being able to turn his career around. So for me, Death Count is worth, I think, probably about a 3 out of 10. It really is a slog of a film, barely even professional enough to count as a proper feature in its own right, and the story is so vague and generic as to be almost insulting to your intelligence. Good gore, and Sarah French is a potentially likeable lead, but other than that, well, this is the film that normies think of when they see Saw, a cheap, badly acted, dirty little mean-spirited gore fest. Whereas for me, it just made me want to watch Saw 3 again really, really badly.
It's beautiful.